Hello and welcome to Mława, which is in a Mazurian area of Poland. I've come today to a German military cemetery, quite unusual. Certainly in this part of the world, we are just over the former border between Germany and Poland. This, I believe, though I'm not absolutely 100% certain, was in fact Germany. But it's bang on the border, and I'm now going to have a look at the military cemetery here. This stone perhaps sums up the idea of the cemetery, this German military cemetery. Hier ruhen gefallene deutsche Soldaten des Krieges 1914 bis 1918, gedenkt ihrer und der Opfer aller Kriege. Again, translated into Polish, tu spoczywają żołnierze niemiecki polegli w wojnie 1914 do 1918 dla ich upamiętnienia oraz ofiar wszystkich wojen. Here lie German soldiers who died in the First World War, 1914-1918, and to remember them as well as the victims of all wars. Clearly, this type of a note was the sort of thing that was needed when the cemetery was reconstructed in 1995-1996. There are 12,500 German dead buried in this cemetery. Now, the cemetery was started, it was opened for the dead of the First World War. The battles that took place here were quite quickly over. Mława was the first place in the former Russia, which was actually occupied by the Germans. The population certainly greeted the Germans as liberators in 1914. The population was largely Jewish, and there's even a photograph. I think it's a photograph. It looks like a photograph of the day the Germans came into Mława. The dead of the Second World War were also buried here. They were because it was a convenient place to actually put them. Now, a lot of Polish prisoners of war, for example, actually worked on the cemetery. At the time, there was about 1,500 Germans were buried here. In the mid-90s, German graveyards throughout Poland were evacuated, and the people, certainly from this region, were brought here. There are other German military graveyards. One, for example, I think is in Bydgoszcz. There's another one near Przemysl in southeastern Poland. So we can see here the names of many of the people, and we'll choose one of the gravestones to have, the memory stones I should say, to actually look at. We see here people who died from the Second World War, 1944, 1939, 1945. The front in the Second World War stood not so far from here in end of 1944, beginning of 1945, on the border. Looking at the dead here, and the cross. Whereas as a former soldier myself, I do have a certain empathy with all soldiers who die, but given the terrible atrocities committed in the name of these people. Of course, the overwhelming bulk had nothing to do with these atrocities, because those who carried out the atrocities themselves were not usually fighting soldiers. They were those who were in units which avoided fighting. There are exceptions to this. Some of the police battalions, certainly, who carried out terrible killings in Russia, for example, did fight very well in the December to 1941 to around February, March 1942, and were certainly eliminated in very, very large numbers. But as a rule, those that carried out the killings, the Einsatz commandos, these were people who were largely very cowardly and certainly would not have been frontline. But despite this, the only thought that I have, as far as the Second World War is, that I hate to say it, and it's very unpolitically incorrect, but the only feeling that goes in my mind is it's a pity the cemetery wasn't much bigger.